The morning light filtered through the conference room windows as I watched my sister Elena accept congratulations from the board members, her manicured hands trembling with what everyone assumed was humble gratitude. But I knew better. I had seen this exact scene before in my previous life, when she'd stolen my inheritance and left me to rot while she built an empire on my family's wealth. "Thank you all so much," Elena whispered, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "I never expected to inherit everything. My sister Sophia was always the business-minded one." The scent of her expensive perfume, the same Chanel number 5 she'd worn to my deathbed, filled the air like a toxic cloud. I sat in the corner playing the role of the grieving sister who'd just signed away her birthright. The lawyers shuffled their papers, satisfied with another inheritance neatly transferred. What they didn't know was that I died at 28 in my first life, alone and penniless, watching Elena build a media empire with my grandfather's money. What they couldn't see was the fire burning behind my calm smile as I remembered every betrayal that had led to my first death. This time would be different. "I'm just so grateful Sophia chose to donate her share to me," Elena continued, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "She understands that I can put the money to better use." I nodded graciously, my hands folded like an obedient child. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mahogany table, and I could smell the lingering coffee from the lawyers' cups. Elena has always been the visionary in our family. But as I spoke those words, my phone buzzed with a text from my private investigator. The first piece of information I'd need to destroy her had just arrived. The funeral reception was a masterclass in Elena's manipulation. She glided through the crowd in her designer black dress, accepting condolences for our grandfather's death while simultaneously networking with potential investors. The smell of lilies and catered hors d'oeuvres filled the air, mixing with the undertone of expensive cologne and whispered business deals. I watched her corner Marcus Chen, the tech mogul who'd funded her first startup in my previous life. He was younger now, not yet the billionaire he'd become, but his eyes still held that sharp intelligence that had made him dangerous. "Sophia was so generous to give me the inheritance," Elena was saying, her hand resting on Marcus's arm. "With 20 million in capital, I can finally launch my media platform, the one I've been dreaming about. 20 million, the exact amount she'd stolen from me before." I drifted closer, balancing a cup of coffee that had gone cold in my hands. The bitter taste matched the fury coiling in my stomach. Around us, the reception hummed with polite conversation and the gentle clink of champagne glasses against silver trays. "Your sister seems different," Marcus observed, glancing at me with curiosity. "Very quiet today." Elena's laugh was like breaking glass. "Oh, Sophia's always been simple. She prefers books to business. I'm just grateful she trusts me to handle the family legacy." I smiled serenely, giving Marcus a little wave. "Elena's always been the smart one. I wouldn't know what to do with all that money." But I'd already made my first move. The documents Elena had signed weren't just transferring the inheritance. They'd placed it in a trust with very specific conditions. Conditions that would become relevant very soon. Marcus handed Elena his business card, the expensive cardstock crisp between his fingers. "I'd love to hear more about this media platform. Perhaps we could meet next week?" "I'll call you tomorrow," Elena promised, her eyes gleaming with triumph. As they parted ways, Elena caught my eye across the room. Her smile was victorious, predatory. She thought she'd won again. She thought I was still the naive sister who'd trusted her completely in our first life. She had no idea what was coming. That evening, I returned to my small apartment, the complete opposite of the penthouse Elena had moved into with our money. The walls were bare, except for a single framed photo of our grandfather, the furniture secondhand, everything designed to reinforce the image of the simple, unworldly sister who couldn't handle business. The contrast was deliberate. Elena needed to believe I was still harmless. I opened my laptop and began researching Marcus Chen's current ventures. In my previous life, he'd been Elena's biggest supporter, funding her expansion into social media and digital marketing. But now, seeing him 6 years younger, I realized he had vulnerabilities she'd never exploited. His current company, Quantum Dynamics, was struggling with a hostile takeover bid from a larger corporation. The financial press had been brutal, questioning his leadership and the company's future. He needed capital, connections, and most importantly, he needed someone who understood the true value of data analytics in the emerging social media landscape. I'd been working in tech support in my previous life, watching from the sidelines as Elena built her empire. But I'd been paying attention, learning, understanding the mechanics of digital influence and viral marketing that she'd claimed as her own innovations. The irony was perfect. Marcus thought he was meeting with a simple-minded woman who'd just given away her fortune. He had no idea he was about to encounter someone who understood his business better than he did. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized from my previous life's research. Quantum Dynamics, this is Marcus Chen. Mr. Chen, this is Sophia Martinez. We met at my grandfather's funeral today. I was wondering if we could discuss a potential investment opportunity. The silence on the other end stretched for several heartbeats. When he finally spoke, his voice was cautious, confused. I thought your sister inherited your grandfather's estate. She did. But I have some personal savings I'd like to put to work. Perhaps we could meet tomorrow. I could hear the calculator in his brain working. Elena had promised him $20 million, but here was her supposedly simple sister offering her own money. In his world, money was money, regardless of the source. I could make time around lunch, he said finally. After hanging up, I opened the encrypted folder on my laptop. Inside were digital copies of every document related to Elena's business dealings, her personal communications, and, most importantly, her actual business plan for the media platform she'd pitched to Marcus. The plan she'd stolen from me in our first life, when I'd been naive enough to share my ideas with my beloved sister. But this time I had something she didn't expect. This time I had the experience of watching her fail. The coffee shop Marcus had chosen was one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and the constant hiss of the espresso machine. The scent of roasted beans mixed with the chatter of remote workers and the occasional ring of the register. Indie music played softly in the background, creating an atmosphere of casual sophistication. I arrived early, choosing a corner table where I could observe the entrance. The morning crowd was typical for this neighborhood. Young professionals typing on laptops, artists sketching in notebooks, a few older business people reading newspapers while nursing their second cups of coffee. Marcus walked in precisely on time, his sharp charcoal suit standing out among the casual dress of the other patrons. He scanned the room until he spotted me, then approached with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to closing deals. Sophia, he said, extending his hand. I have to admit, I'm curious about this investment opportunity. I shook his hand, noting the firmness of his grip and the slight callus on his index finger from years of computer work. Thank you for meeting with me. I know this must seem unusual, given Elena's recent inheritance. I won't lie, it's intriguing. Your sister mentioned you were more interested in books than business. I smiled, stirring my latte with deliberate care. The foam art on top, a delicate leaf pattern, began to dissolve under my spoon. Elena often underestimates me. She sees what she wants to see. And what do you see? I pulled out a tablet and slid it across the small wooden table. On the screen was a detailed business plan, complete with market analysis, revenue projections, and technological infrastructure requirements. I see an opportunity to revolutionize how people consume and share information online. Marcus's eyes widened as he scrolled through the document. The plan was comprehensive, innovative, and technically sound. More importantly, it addressed the exact market gaps that his company was struggling to fill. This is impressive, he said finally, his voice tinged with surprise. How did you develop this? I may not have an MBA, but I have something more valuable. I understand how people actually use technology. I've spent years observing user behavior, identifying patterns that traditional market research misses. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. I'd observed user behavior across 2 lifetimes, watching Elena implement my stolen ideas with moderate success, while making critical errors I'd spotted too late to correct. The social media platform Elena described to you yesterday, I continued, is based on outdated assumptions about user engagement. My approach focuses on authentic community building rather than algorithmic manipulation. Marcus set down the tablet, his expression thoughtful. He glanced around the coffee shop, perhaps processing the irony of discussing cutting-edge technology in such a deliberately analog environment. How much are you looking to invest? 5 million initially, with the possibility of additional funding as the platform grows. And your sister, how does she factor into this? I took a sip of my latte, tasting the bitter edge beneath the foam. Elena has her own path. This would be a separate venture entirely. What I didn't mention was that Elena's path was about to become significantly more complicated. The trust I'd placed her inheritance in had a clause requiring board approval for any expenditures over $1 million, and I'd made sure to stock that board with financial advisors who understood the importance of due diligence. Elena would discover that her $20 million wasn't quite as accessible as she'd assumed. I'm interested, Marcus said, leaning forward, but I'd want to be involved in the development process. My company has resources that could accelerate the timeline. I was hoping you'd say that. We shook hands, sealing a partnership that would reshape both of our futures. As Marcus left the coffee shop, I remained at the table, watching through the window as he walked down the street, already pulling out his phone to make calls. The first piece of my revenge was in motion. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Elena. Her name on the screen made my stomach clench, but I answered with practiced calm. Sophia, I just heard the strangest thing. Someone told me you had a meeting with Marcus Chen today. I did. We discussed a potential investment. The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. When Elena finally spoke, her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. What kind of investment? A tech startup, something I've been working on in my spare time. Sophia, we need to talk, now. The line went dead. I finished my latte slowly, savoring the bitter taste that reminded me of the medicine I'd taken in my previous life, trying to stay alive long enough to see Elena's empire crumble. I'd failed then, but this time I had advantages she couldn't imagine. An hour later, Elena stormed into my apartment without knocking, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor like gunshots. The scent of her anger was almost palpable, mixing with the perfume that had become her signature. What the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled from her rapid journey across town. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing the partnership agreement Marcus had already sent over. I'm sorry, what do you mean? Don't play dumb with me, Sophia. You gave me the inheritance because you said you couldn't handle business. Now you're making investments behind my back? I'm using my own money, I said mildly. The inheritance was a gift to you. What I do with my personal savings is my business. Elena's face flushed red, a stark contrast to her pale foundation. Your personal savings? You work in tech support. You don't have $5 million. You'd be surprised what you can accumulate when you live modestly and invest wisely. It was a lie, but a necessary one. The $5 million was coming from offshore accounts I'd established in my previous life. Money I'd hidden from Elena's grasping hands during those final months when she'd been systematically draining my assets. This is sabotage, Elena hissed, beginning to pace the small living room like a caged animal. You're trying to undermine my business before it even starts. Your business? I closed my laptop and stood up, meeting her eyes for the first time since her arrival. You mean the social media platform you described to Marcus? The one based on authentic community building rather than algorithmic manipulation. The color drained from Elena's face as if someone had pulled a plug. How did you know about your business plan? The same way I knew you'd approach Marcus for funding. The same way I knew you'd try to corner the market on social media analytics. I smiled, watching her stumble backward toward the door. You're not as unpredictable as you think, Elena. You're supposed to be the simple one, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the refrigerator. I let you believe that because it was easier. But simplicity isn't the same as stupidity. Elena fled my apartment, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her perfume and the echo of her heels on the stairwell. I returned to my laptop where a new email from Marcus was waiting. The partnership agreement was signed, countersigned, and ready for implementation. But more importantly, he'd included a note about Elena's attempt to secure funding for her own social media venture. Your sister seems to have some interesting ideas, he'd written. Unfortunately, they're remarkably similar to the proposal you showed me yesterday. I thought you should know. I smiled, typing a response. Elena has always been good at recognizing quality ideas, perhaps too good. Within the hour, Marcus had forwarded me a copy of Elena's entire business presentation, complete with her financial projections and technical specifications. Every detail was exactly as I remembered from my previous life, when she'd stolen my work and claimed it as her own. This time, I had the documentation to prove the ideas were mine. The next morning brought news that would shatter Elena's carefully constructed plans. I received a call from the trust administrator confirming that Elena's access to the inheritance had been frozen, pending a financial audit. My phone rang at exactly 9 a.m., Elena's panicked voice cutting through the morning quiet. "Sophia, you have to help me." Elena's voice was strained, desperate. "Something's wrong with the trust. They're saying I can't access grandfather's money." "That's strange," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice while sipping my morning coffee. "Did you fill out the proper forms?" "What forms? Nobody told me about forms." "The expenditure authorization forms. Any distribution over $1 million requires board approval and documentation of the intended use." I paused, letting the information sink in. "Didn't the lawyers explain the trust structure to you?" "They said it was a standard inheritance setup." "It is, with standard safeguards to protect the beneficiary from making impulsive decisions." I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "Don't worry, Elena. I'm sure once you provide the necessary documentation, everything will be resolved." "What documentation?" "Business plan, financial projections, proof of concept, market analysis, intellectual property verification." I let the list trail off, knowing each item would be another nail in her coffin. "Intellectual property verification?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Standard procedure. They need to make sure you're not infringing on existing patents or copyrights, or stealing someone else's ideas." The line went dead. I set down my phone and looked out the window of my small apartment. The view wasn't much, a parking lot and a small strip of grass, but it was peaceful. In my previous life, I'd been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, on proving myself worthy of Elena's respect, that I'd never appreciated the simple pleasure of a quiet morning. My laptop chimed with an incoming email from Marcus. The subject line made me smile. "Quantum Dynamics Partnership, Phase 1 complete." The email contained technical specifications for the prototype social media platform we'd been developing in secret. The features were revolutionary: authentic user verification, community-driven content curation, and algorithmic transparency that would make traditional social media platforms obsolete. More importantly, every innovation was documented, copyrighted, and legally protected under my name. Elena would never be able to claim ownership of these ideas again. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Elena's assistant, a nervous young man named David, knocked on my door with a manila envelope in his hands. His cheap suit was wrinkled, and he kept glancing over his shoulder as if he expected to be followed. "Ms. Martinez, Ms. Elena asked me to deliver this to you." Inside the envelope was a formal letter from Elena's lawyer, demanding that I cease all business activities that might compete with her planned social media venture. The letter cited potential conflicts of interest and threatened legal action if I didn't comply. The letterhead was impressive. Gold embossed, expensive paper, but the content was laughably weak. Elena was grasping at straws, trying to use intimidation tactics that might have worked against the old Sophia, but would be useless against someone who'd already died once. I read the letter twice, then called Marcus. "Did you get Elena's cease and desist letter too?" I asked. "Just finished reading it. Her lawyer seems to think she has exclusive rights to the social media space." "That's interesting, considering she doesn't have a functioning prototype, copyrighted algorithms, or verified intellectual property." "About that," Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral, "I did some research into your sister's previous business ventures. The digital marketing company she sold last year, the algorithms she claimed to have developed, they're remarkably similar to open source code that's been available for years." "That's concerning." "It gets worse. The buyer is now facing a class action lawsuit from clients who claim the algorithms didn't work as advertised. Elena sold them a broken system and disappeared with the money. I felt a chill run down my spine. In my previous life, I'd been too naive to investigate Elena's business practices. I'd trusted her completely, even as she systematically destroyed my financial security. Marcus, I need to ask you something. When Elena approached you about her social media platform, did she provide any original code or technical documentation? Nothing substantial, just high-level concepts and marketing projections. And when I showed you my business plan, what convinced you it was viable? The working prototype, the functional algorithms, the beta testing data from real users. He paused. Why do you ask? Because I'm starting to understand the full scope of my sister's business model. Elena didn't create innovative technology. She stole it, repackaged it, and sold it to unsuspecting investors. In my previous life, she'd stolen my ideas because I'd been too trusting to protect them. This time, she was trying to steal concepts she didn't understand from a sister she thought was too simple to fight back. There's something else, Marcus continued. Elena scheduled a meeting with my board of directors for tomorrow. She's planning to present what she calls a revolutionary social media platform and requesting a direct investment of $20 million. $20 million, I repeated, the exact amount she inherited. The same amount she can't access because of the trust limitations. Marcus, I need to be at that meeting. I was hoping you'd say that. The quantum dynamics boardroom was exactly as I remembered from my previous life. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a massive glass conference table that reflected the afternoon sunlight, and the subtle scent of expensive coffee and leather chairs. But this time, I wasn't a visitor begging for scraps. I was a partner with a stake in the company's future. The room buzzed with quiet conversation as board members reviewed documents and sipped coffee from delicate porcelain cups. The atmosphere was professional but relaxed, the kind of environment where million-dollar decisions were made with the same casualness as choosing lunch. Elena arrived 15 minutes late, her designer suit perfectly tailored but her confidence slightly shaken. She carried herself with forced poise, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands as she set up her presentation materials. She didn't notice me sitting in the back corner until she was already connecting her laptop to the projection system. Thank you all for taking the time to meet with me, she began, her voice steady despite the surprise in her eyes when she spotted me. I'm here to present a revolutionary social media platform that will change how people connect and share information online. So, the presentation was flawless, polished, and completely stolen from my work. Every slide, every concept, every technical specification was something I'd developed in my previous life. Ideas Elena had appropriated and claimed as her own, but this time I had proof. The core innovation, Elena continued, clicking to a slide that made my blood boil with recognition, is our authentic user verification system, which eliminates fake accounts and ensures genuine community building. Marcus leaned forward, his expression carefully neutral. That's interesting. Can you show us the functional prototype? The prototype is still in development, but I can demonstrate the core algorithms. Actually, I interrupted, standing up from my corner chair. I think there might be some confusion about the intellectual property rights for this technology. Elena's face went white as if she'd seen a ghost. Sophia, what are you doing here? I'm a partner in quantum dynamics, I said, walking to the front of the room with measured steps. And I need to inform the board that Ms. Elena Martinez is attempting to present copyrighted technology as her own original work. I connected my laptop to the presentation system, displaying the copyright documentation, technical specifications, and beta testing data for the social media platform Elena had just claimed to have invented. As you can see, I continued, my voice carrying easily through the silent room, every innovation Ms. Martinez has presented is already protected under my intellectual property portfolio. The authentic user verification system, the community-driven content curation, the algorithmic transparency features, all of these were developed by me over the past 6 months. Elena stumbled backward, knocking over a glass of water that sent liquid cascading across the polished table. That's impossible. You don't have the technical expertise. I have a bachelor's degree in computer science from MIT and 7 years of experience in user interface design, I said calmly. I've been working in tech support by choice, not necessity. The room fell silent, except for the distant hum of the air conditioning and the soft clicking of keyboards as board members pulled up the copyright database to verify my claims. This is ridiculous, Elena said, her voice rising to an almost hysterical pitch. Sophia couldn't develop this kind of technology. She's not capable. Of what? I asked, my voice cutting through her protest like a blade. Of innovation, of strategic thinking, of building something valuable without stealing it from someone else? Marcus stood up, his expression grave. Ms. Martinez, I'm afraid this meeting is over. Quantum dynamics has zero tolerance for intellectual property theft. You can't do this to me, Elena said, desperation creeping into her voice as she realized the full scope of her humiliation. I'm family. We can work together, share the profits. The same way you shared the profits from grandfather's digital marketing company? I asked. The one you sold with broken algorithms and fraudulent technical documentation? Elena's face crumpled like a house of cards in the wind. In that moment, she looked exactly as she had in my previous life when the authorities had finally caught up with her schemes. Defeated, desperate, and completely out of options. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the whispered conversations of the board members. I'll do anything. I'll give you back the inheritance money. The inheritance money is in a trust that requires board approval for any expenditures, I said, my voice calm and final. And I'm on that board. The security guards escorted Elena from the building while she was still protesting her innocence. Through the boardroom windows, I watched her stumble across the parking lot, her designer heels clicking erratically against the asphalt as photographers from tech blogs snapped pictures of her dramatic exit. That was impressive, Marcus said once she was gone, loosening his tie slightly. But I have to ask, how long have you been planning this? I looked out at the city skyline, the buildings glinting in the afternoon sun like a constellation of ambition and achievement. Longer than you might imagine. And the family connection? Is that going to be a problem going forward? I thought about Elena's deathbed visit in my previous life, how she'd stood in the doorway of my hospital room and told me I'd brought my misfortune on myself, how she'd refused to pay for my medical treatment even as she built an empire on my stolen ideas. No, I said finally, it won't be a problem. That evening, I returned to my apartment to find Elena waiting in the hallway. Her perfect makeup smeared with tears and mascara, running in dark streaks down her cheeks. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of her artificial confidence. Sophia, please, she said, struggling to her feet from where she'd been sitting on the floor. We need to talk. I don't think we do. I can explain everything, the business with Marcus, the inheritance, the social media platform. It's all a misunderstanding. I unlocked my door but didn't invite her inside. The hallway smelled of industrial cleaning products and the faint mustiness of old carpet. A misunderstanding? I was trying to protect you. You're brilliant, but you're not business-minded. I thought if I could make the ideas profitable, we could both benefit. By stealing my work and claiming it as your own? By leveraging your technical skills with my business acumen. We could have been partners. I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse. Instead, I saw only the calculated manipulation I'd grown accustomed to in my previous life. Even now, even after being caught red-handed, she was still trying to reframe her theft as some kind of favor. Elena, do you remember the digital marketing company you sold last year? Of course, it was a great success. The algorithms you claim to have developed were open-source code that didn't work as advertised. The buyer is facing a class action lawsuit, and 3 employees lost their jobs when the company failed. Elena's expression flickered, but she didn't deny the accusation. And the social media platform you presented today? Every innovation was stolen from my work, just like you stole my ideas in... I caught myself before mentioning my previous life. Just like you've always stolen from me. I never stole anything from you, Elena said, her voice taking on the petulant tone I remembered from our childhood. I enhanced your ideas, made them marketable, by taking credit for my work and leaving me with nothing. You're being dramatic. I stepped inside my apartment and started to close the door. Elena, I want you to think about something. In all the years we've known each other, can you remember a single instance where you created something original, something that came from your own mind, your own effort, your own genuine innovation? Elena stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. You can't, I continued, because you've never created anything. You've only stolen, repackaged, and sold other people's work. And now you're out of people to steal from. I closed the door and turned the lock, listening to Elena's footsteps echoing down the hallway. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I felt truly free. My phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. Board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. We need to discuss the future of quantum dynamics. I smiled, knowing that future would be very different from the one Elena had planned. The next morning's board meeting was a revelation. Marcus had spent the night reviewing my technical documentation and was ready to implement the social media platform immediately. But his proposal went far beyond what I'd originally envisioned. I want to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer, he said, sliding a contract across the conference table. Full partnership, equity stake, and complete control over the technical development of all our platforms. I read through the contract carefully, noting the salary figures that would make me financially independent within a year. The numbers were staggering. More money than I'd ever dreamed of in my previous life. This is generous, but I'm not sure I'm ready for such a significant role. Sophia, you've single-handedly developed technology that could revolutionize social media. You've identified market gaps that billion-dollar companies have missed. And you've done it while working in tech support and living in a studio apartment. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. I don't think you understand your own potential. I understand it perfectly. I also understand the responsibilities that come with it, such as making sure the platform is used ethically, protecting user privacy, preventing the kind of algorithmic manipulation that's destroying healthy discourse online. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, the expression seemed genuinely warm. That's exactly why I want you as CTO. Your sister would have used this technology to maximize profit. Regardless of the social cost, you want to use it to make the world better. I signed the contract, officially becoming Chief Technology Officer of Quantum Dynamics at the age of 28. The same age I'd died in my previous life, penniless and forgotten. But the real transformation came 6 months later, when our social media platform launched to unprecedented success. The authentic user verification system eliminated fake accounts and bot networks. The community-driven content curation reduced misinformation and promoted genuine discussion. The algorithmic transparency features allowed users to understand and control their own data. Within 3 months, we had 50 million active users. Within 6 months, we'd attracted acquisition offers from every major tech company in Silicon Valley. Within a year, Quantum Dynamics was valued at over $2 billion, and I owned 30% of the company. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning, 6 months after our platform launch. I was reviewing user engagement metrics when my assistant knocked on my office door. Ms. Martinez, there's a call from the Inheritance Trust Board. They say it's urgent. I picked up the phone, already knowing what I would hear. Ms. Martinez, the chairman said, his voice carefully professional, we need to discuss your sister's financial situation. She's requested an emergency distribution to cover debts from a failed platform launch. What kind of debts? Approximately $2 million, venue costs, marketing expenses, development contracts, legal fees. She's leveraged everything against the expected success of her platform. Elena had tried to launch her own social media platform, using different technology and a different name, but marketing it with the same concepts she'd stolen from me. According to the news reports I'd been following, the platform had attracted fewer than 1,000 users before shutting down due to technical failures. And you're calling me because? Because you're the primary beneficiary of the trust in the event that Ms. Elena Martinez is unable to manage her inheritance responsibly. The terms state that after 3 documented instances of financial mismanagement, control of the trust transfers to the co-beneficiary. I sat down heavily in my office chair, staring out at the city skyline through the floor to ceiling windows. 3 instances? The fraudulent sale of the digital marketing company, the intellectual property theft attempt with quantum dynamics, and now the failed launch of her copycat platform. Our legal team has determined that these constitute a pattern of irresponsible financial behavior. What does that mean practically? It means you now control Elena's inheritance, all $20 million plus the accumulated interest from the past year. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for several minutes, processing the implications. Elena had managed to lose control of her inheritance through her own poor decisions, and now I was financially responsible for her future, but I was also free to make my own choices about how to use that responsibility. The meeting with Elena took place in my office, high above the city she'd once planned to conquer. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was coming to me, hat in hand, in the very building where she'd tried to steal my life's work. She arrived looking haggard, her designer clothes replaced with off-the-rack business attire, her confidence shattered. The woman who'd once glided through rooms like she owned them now walked with the uncertain steps of someone who'd lost everything. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "The trust board informed me about the transfer of control. I know, I'm here to ask for your help." "What kind of help?" Elena took a deep breath, and I could see her struggling to find the right words. "I need money to pay off my debts. $2 million. I can't get a loan because of my financial history, and I can't declare bankruptcy because of the trust structure. And you want me to authorize the distribution. I want you to help me start over. Clean slate, no debts, no legal complications." I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine change. "Elena, what have you learned from the failure of your platform?" "That I'm not cut out for entrepreneurship." "That's not what I asked." Elena shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I learned that I can't succeed by copying other people's ideas. And that I need to develop my own skills instead of relying on stolen concepts. Anything else?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city below. "I learned that you were right about me. I've never created anything original. I've only stolen and repackaged other people's work. And how does that make you feel? Ashamed, angry, jealous of your success?" I leaned back in my chair, considering my options. Elena was offering a partial admission of guilt, but her motivations were still selfish. She wanted help, not because she genuinely changed, but because she was desperate. "I'll pay off your debts," I said finally. Elena's face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Sophia. I knew you'd—" "But I have conditions." Her expression became wary. "What kind of conditions?" "First, you'll sign a legal document acknowledging your history of intellectual property theft and promising never to claim credit for my work again." "That's reasonable." "Second, you'll undergo financial counseling to learn proper money management and business ethics." "Okay." "Third, you'll get a legitimate job and work for someone else for at least 3 years before attempting to start another business." Elena's face fell. 3 years? 3 years to learn how successful businesses actually operate. 3 years to develop skills that can't be stolen from someone else. 3 years to prove you can create value through honest effort. And if I refuse, then you can declare bankruptcy and figure out your own path forward. Elena stared out my office window at the city below, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Having power over me for once." "I'm trying to help you become a better person. The same way you claimed to be helping me when you stole my inheritance." "That's different." "How?" Elena couldn't answer because there was no answer. Her theft had been motivated by greed and jealousy, while my conditions were designed to teach her responsibility and self-reliance. "I accept your conditions," she said finally. "Good, I'll have the legal documents prepared." Helena stood up, smoothing down her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. "Sophia, I have to ask, how did you know? How did you know I'd fail?" "Because you've always failed when you couldn't steal from someone else. The only difference this time was that I protected my work before you could take it." After Elena left, I sat alone in my office, watching the sun set over the city. The view from the 42nd floor was spectacular, a panorama of lights and possibilities stretching to the horizon. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Dinner tomorrow? I have news about the acquisition offers. I smiled, thinking about the future that was finally mine to control. In my previous life, I'd died alone and forgotten, watching Elena build an empire on my stolen ideas. This time, I was the one with the empire, and Elena was the one starting over. But more importantly, I was learning to use my power responsibly. I could have destroyed Elena completely, left her to face bankruptcy and legal consequences alone. Instead, I was giving her a chance to become the person she'd always claimed to be, someone who could succeed through her own efforts. Whether she took that chance or wasted it was up to her. 3 years later, I stood on the deck of my private yacht, watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean in shades of gold and crimson. The warm breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom, a reminder of how far I'd traveled from the small apartment where I'd begun my second life. Quantum Dynamics had been acquired by a major tech consortium for $3 billion, making me one of the youngest billionaires in the world. But money wasn't the real victory. It was the knowledge that I'd built something meaningful, something that made the world better rather than worse. My phone buzzed with an email from Elena. She was working as a marketing director for a nonprofit organization, using her communication skills to promote literacy programs in underserved communities. The email was brief but genuine. Sophia, I saw the news about your new educational technology initiative. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, and I wanted you to know that I'm proud of what I've accomplished too. 3 years of honest work has taught me more about business than 10 years of shortcuts ever did. Thank you for forcing me to grow up. Elena. I smiled, remembering the bitter, desperate woman who'd stood in my office begging for help. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned to create value through her own efforts. My assistant approached with a tablet containing the day's schedule. Ms. Martinez, the foundation board meeting is in an hour. They're expecting your decision about the scholarship program. The scholarship program was designed to help young entrepreneurs develop genuine business skills rather than relying on connections or inherited wealth. It was my way of ensuring the next generation wouldn't repeat Elena's mistakes. Tell them I've decided to fund the program for 10 years, I said. Full scholarships for anyone who can demonstrate innovation, integrity, and commitment to ethical business practices. As the yacht sailed toward the sunset, I thought about the 2 lives I'd lived and the lessons I'd learned. In my first life, I'd been naive, trusting, and ultimately powerless to protect myself from Elena's betrayal. In my second life, I'd been strategic, careful, and ultimately successful in building something lasting. But the real victory wasn't my wealth or my power. It was the knowledge that I'd used both to create something better than revenge. I'd given Elena a chance to become the person she'd always claimed to be, and she'd taken it. The circle was complete, but instead of ending in destruction, it had ended in growth. For both of us. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, blue and beautiful and full of possibilities. I raised my glass of wine to the setting sun, a toast to second chances and the courage to take them. Behind me, the past was just a wake in the water, already fading as we sailed toward tomorrow.